Miss Quimby frowned down at his pocket watch, reading the numbers for the third time. His mind couldn't process the calculations that usually came so easily. What day was it again? This morning felt like a lifetime ago. 9 days, 17 hours, 3 minutes. He wouldn't count the potions berries had used to heal him. He hadn't drunk them, and he hadn't experienced any sort of things as a result. By the time he'd awakened, it had been as if nothing had ever happened. The second hand ticked steadily along. Was he deluding himself? Would starting over make more sense? Nick closed the watch and jammed it into his pocket. Did it even matter? He was successfully avoiding potions. Only the single relapse thus far. Berries neither shunned him nor pitied him, merely accepted. He had a vision for his future, one that went beyond potion parties and late-night card games. One that included the blonde-haired beauty that lay sprawled across the narrow train bed, sleeping off the effects of her eventful morning. He had pulled the armchair close enough that he could touch her, but had so far resisted the impulse to do so. She deserved her rest, and he needed the time to look upon her and admire the aftermath of their passionate embrace. A few stray curls had come loose from their pins, framing her face and spilling across the pillow. Her bodice was askew, exposing the trim along the top of her corset. It was, as he had suspected, delightfully pink. He'd never had much use for the color pink, but now it would forever remind him of her. Miss Ida Quimby. He needed to practice her surname. It wouldn't do to wake up tomorrow having forgotten it all over again. Even if it was the least important part of her name. Soon enough she would be Ida Masterson, Countess of Sharp. Nick had no idea when or how he'd gone and fallen in love with her, but here he was, wanting to throw himself at her feet and beg to do her bidding. From her brother, even if he had to pummel the man to do it, and then scurry back to London for the hastiest wedding he could arrange. He'd already penned a note to his mother, and he'd drop it at the telegraph office the moment they reached Suez. This all assumed, of course, that Ida would accept his proposal. She might think him completely mad. What sort of woman married a man she'd met on a train and known for less than 2 weeks? He needed her to accept him. He craved her with every fibre of his being. He would do all that he could to make himself worthy of her. The steamer to Bombay took 13 days. He would spend each one wooing her, and protecting her from stalkers and knife-wielding thugs. She stirred beside him, stretching her limbs and rubbing her eyes. Nick took in every twist of her body, every again, as he imagined how he might ravish her, and fully this time. He scooted the chair away from the bed. He wouldn't rush her. Passionate as she was, he doubted the wait would be too terrible. Ida yawned. How long did I sleep? 37 minutes. She sat up, tugging her dress into place. That is very exact. I checked. Yes, I have noticed that nervous habit of yours. Long, delicate fingers closed the buttons of her bodice, hiding that hint of her undergarments. Another day he'd strip all those layers away. Did you forget my name again while I was sleeping? Miss, Ivy Quigley, correct? His attempt at a straight face failed catastrophically, and they both burst out laughing. So now you know who I am. No more than I did before. I merely have a second name by which to call you. You haven't heard of my father? Nick's brows knitted together. Should I have? Sir Mortimer Quimby. That does sound familiar. He was knighted for his work designing and building a... Memories fell into place. The party. Sir Mortimer's library. Sir Boat Builder of the glowing wallpaper is your father? Her cheeks colored. Yes, he is. I hate that wallpaper. Nick raked a hand through his hair. Bloody hell! So, you do know my... Her eyes fell to the floor. You know my scandal. He grabbed her hand, holding it in both of his. No, I don't, nor do I care. I'm only stunned because I was in your house. What? I was at his party 2 nights before we met. I was there, in your house, and I had no idea. No idea you were there. No idea that you even existed. No idea that the love of my life... I stay in my room during the parties. I never liked them much in the first place, and since the scandal, my parents would prefer that people forget I exist. Tell me about it. She withdrew her hand and slid back on the bed, putting more distance between them. I get angry thinking about it. Don't take it personally. I won't. I told you I had many suitors, and I liked... People knew that, but I didn't think it mattered. Minorly scandalous. Nothing worth putting in the papers. But I apparently had a reputation. My father was pushing for a betrothal to Lord Carsley, part of a business arrangement where Carsley's father would invest in a new shipbuilding venture. Nick's posture stiffened. Ida was the woman his friend Carsley had almost married? Carsley had shrugged off being jilted, saying she wasn't worth fussing over. Was he out of his mind? Losing her was the most devastating thing Nick could imagine. He fought for composure, needing to hear what had happened. I can't get behind a man selling his daughter in a business deal, he said, surprising himself with the evenness of his tone. But at least Carsley is a decent sort. No. Nick's jaw dropped open. He's one of my best friends. Ida shrank back against the wall, her shoulders drooping. Never mind. He started to reach for her, but stopped with his hand in midair, letting it drop before speaking. No, please, go on. Tell me why you dislike him. You won't believe me. No one does. Her words were laced with venom. His sweet, wounded berries. He wanted to wrap her up in his arms and hold her forever. Tell me, please. She looked back up and breathed deeply. I liked Carsley. He was charming, funny, amiable, handsome, and a good dancer. I can't speak for his dancing skills, but I have known him to be all those other things. I thought to get to know him better. I kissed him a number of times. He would also pinch my bottom, usually without warning. Her cheeks flamed. I didn't stop him because I liked it. Things were going well, both with the business deal and between us, and at one of my father's party we snuck off for some kisses. He wanted it to go further. I'd whispers if we were caught doing anything like that, and I didn't feel that I was ready, if that makes any sense. It does. We are each ready in our own time. I told him that, and he just laughed. He didn't grab me or touch me, but he blocked the door, and he kept trying to talk me into it. I said no, I don't know how many times. He was telling me it was going to happen, whatever I said, trying to bully me into it. He moved closer and closer as he talked. I didn't think I could get past him out the door, and I knew if he became physical, he was much stronger than I was. So I screamed. Jesus. She didn't even call Nick out for his blasphemy. She was so wrapped up in her emotional tale. People came running. I told them what it was. Hysterical. It only got worse from there. When someone said that none of it mattered because we were expected to marry, I refused him, right there in public and very loudly. Suddenly I was a jilter, a temptress who had led him on. It was my own fault, they said, that I was compromised. My parents tried to smooth things over, wishing to salvage the business deal, but I would not speak anything but the truth, and nothing could have compelled me to recognize. My father was livid. Several men offered to wed me, despite my soiled state, to get at my fortune. I also refused them, much to my family's dismay. I was still going out at the time, thinking surely someone would take my side and see I wasn't the wrongdoer. Instead, I was snubbed and mocked while Carsley was popular as ever. Men laughed with him. Women flirted with him. Everyone. One day I had had enough. I walked up to him at the last party I ever attended, dumped my champagne over his head, and announced to the world that I would rather be a ruined woman than a... She cleared her throat. Than a lecherous, bum-pinching, lying sack of shit. Ida let out a long, slow breath and folded her hands in her lap. So, there you have it, the full and true story of my scandal. Nick's mind reeled. He couldn't wrap his head around the image of Carsley hurting anyone. They had been friends since age 10. He'd had Nick's back during countless wild parties. They'd often spent time together, admiring the young ladies in attendance. Now each of those memories carried a sick taint. How many of those women had been victims of unwanted advances? The pain of betrayal cut Nick as deeply as the knife in his gut, but this wound had no like a brother be so barbaric. Nick? The uncertainty in her voice jolted him. He looked her straight in the eye and held out his hand, leaving it up to her whether to take it. I'd believe you. I hope that I would believe anyone. We men hold all the power, and it is only too easy to abuse it. Her fingers closed around his. It kills me that I didn't and played cards with him, laughed with him. Knowing how much this hurts me, I can't even comprehend how much it must have hurt you. Her thumb traced gentle strokes across the back of his hand. Thank you. How did you not murder me for that kidnapping stunt? Oh, I considered it. You should have done it. You should have left me to die on the streets of Alexandria like the worthless refuse I am. Don't be ridiculous. You were arrogant, but not cruel. Your motivation saved you. I never had any doubt that you believed you were coming to my rescue. I was a jackass. A slight smile touched her lips. I don't disagree. I will spend the rest of my life begging your forgiveness. Didn't I already say I forgave you? You were distracted. She edged closer. Nick sprang from his seat, lifting her up from the bed into a fierce embrace. His lips hovered a breath away from hers when a sharp crack rent the air outside their compartment. He whirled toward the door, shielding her body with his own. A heavy silence fell, the rhythmic clack of the train the only sound cutting through the stillness. Nick stepped to the door and slid it open. The scent of gunpowder filled the narrow hall. Here! A hole in the wall of the corridor, where a bullet had lodged in the wooden paneling. And there's a note! Nick scooped up the scrap of paper from the floor. The pasted-on bits of newsprint read, Last Warning. He ushered Ida back into the room and closed the door behind them, dragging the armchair in front of the entrance for added security. I should have hired a bodyguard, he muttered. She frowned at him. How does one go about it? I haven't the foggiest. My uncle would know, but anyone he sent would be weeks behind us. Nick shook his head ruefully. I will escort you home if you desire, or continue on with you. Your choice. This is your expedition. What of your own mission? I quit. It's not worth my life. Ida thought a moment before replying. I want to keep going. The words that pounded through his brain. No, don't. Go home. Be safe. He looked away from her, clenching his fists to still his trembling hands. So be it. And that was chapter 19. Good evening, everybody.